use algebra to solve. So the first thing we notice in this question is the command word is solve and it's not prove. If you misread a question that says solve and you try to prove it, you'll be in trouble because solving is a totally different thing than proving. When you prove something, it works for every angle in possible. When you're solving something, it only works for specific angles and you're trying to find out what they are. So here we have 3 minus 3 cos x minus 2 sine squared x equals 0. And currently, we can't solve this equation because it has cos of x and it has sine of x. But now that we've done a bunch of identities, you might feel more comfortable with the fact that, hey, I can change sine squared to something. Okay. I can change sine squared to 1 minus cos squared. In fact, probably by the end of this unit, you'll feel like that's just a fact that I've known for a long time, since you're going to use it so often that sine squared is 1 minus cos squared and cos squared is 1 minus sine squared. By the end of the year, you might even think, oh, that's just common sense. Everybody should know that, because we're going to use it that much. Now that we've changed that sine squared to 1 minus cos squared, our equation only has cos in it. If we look at it some more, if we expand this a little bit, multiply that -2 through, we recognize that we have a quadratic equation. How do I solve quadratic equations? Well, I'll make one side equal to 0. It's already equal to 0. I'm just going to rewrite this so that the squared is first, sort of like it's more in the normal format that we're used to. 3 minus 2 are like terms. That just becomes plus 1. So at this point, we have some options. We can either try to factor this, or we could use the quadratic formula. Looking at the numbers, this is going to be a fairly easy one to factor. Because when we set this up for factoring, the only possibility for cos would be 2 cos and cos. The only possibility to get 1 is 1 and 1. So really, the only thing we have to try to figure out are what are the signs going to be between those two terms. And I need my outside 2 cos x and my inside 1 cos x to equal -3 cos x. So they would both have to be negative for that to work. After you've done that, do a quick check. Yes, my first terms give me 2 cos squared. My outside and my inside gives me -3 cos x. And -1 times -1 is plus 1. So this has been factored correctly. So if the first factor is equal to 0, then cos of x would equal 1/2. If the second factor is equal to 0, then cos of x is equal to 1. So our next question is this a non-calculator question? Are these values on our pie plate? Or is this a calculator question that we have to find our reference angle to solve? Cos x equals 1/2. That's on our pie plate. What family? Pi over 3. And it's going to be in quadrant 1 and quadrant 4. Cos x equals 1. When does that happen? At 0 and 2 pi. So once again, we naturally solve things between 0 and 2 pi. Once around the circle is what we have done for a lot of our questions. But again, when you're done a question, always check the domain that they asked for. And so I'm going to go back to the top, say, what was the domain they asked for? Oh, sneaky. They went from 0 to 3 pi over 2. So that would be quadrant 1, quadrant 2, and quadrant 3. No answers in quadrant 4. So when we go back, did we have any answers beyond quadrant 3? Yes. 2 pi is past quadrant 3. 5 pi over 3 was in quadrant 4. So we would have to cancel those ones out. And the only answers in the domain that they asked for are 0 and pi over 3. All right, take some time to try question number 10.